Okay, last few minutes. Maybe I can start, yeah. Okay, I will start a bit introducing the project. So, hello everyone, and thank you for being here on Friday night. I hope you get your drink with you. First things, I'd like to inform you that this event will be recorded and shared on Škuc Gallery YouTube channel and social. So please welcome guest speakers Adelina Luft from Transit Raw Bucharest, Biljana Ciric from What Curators Could Do in Belgrade, and Lorenzo Sandoval from the Institute of Endotic Research in Berlin, based in Berlin. Before starting, I'd like to give you a short presentation and contextualize this symposium. Transformative Institutions Charting Path to Alternative Futures is part of a wider series of discursive events and workshops with Ljubljana-based and international curator and artist. These events are the initial public output of a period of research that Riga curator Tīna Pētersone, hi Tīna, and I've undertaken at the Škuc Gallery last February under the title 02-2024. For this period of research, we propose to work on the question of how and when can artistic and curatorial practice takes on radical politics and social meaning, and in what context. We ask these questions, very complex and wide questions, especially in relation to the reduction of public space available and the exposing of life to increased precarity caused by touristification and privatization of the city of Ljubljana. That is a really big issue going on in the recent year. And we invite artists such as the Noumen Group, a research of artistic collective that engage with the memory of the city to run a workshop and give a talks. And on the 26th of March, we will have a workshop with Crater Collective, which is a collective of designer, architect, biologist, researcher that started a temporary use of an abandoned site in the heart of the city. And they rethink it as a laboratory for coexistence with nature. Tonight, I invited Adelina, Biljana, and Lorenzo that are coming from different geography of this European region. Not only because we wanted to stress how, certain struggles might be interconnected and we might be confronting them also locally, but also because, in my opinion, their way of thinking, rethinking, reformulating the institution, whether it is artist run space or whether it is a curatorial project or part of a bigger organization with a longer story, it's, in my opinion, suggesting the space for collective changing, not only on a speculative manner as a sort of meta-reflection on change, but they are suggesting very concrete step to undertake. And I hope they will share with us their own strategy, their own learning by doing. And I thank you, all of them, to be here tonight. It's so great for me to have such great thinkers and friends here. And I thank you to be here, and also Tia Cicek, who helped us to organize everything for all these weeks. Thank you. If Adelina, you want to start?
Okay, sure. Yeah, hello everyone. Thank you very much, Giulia, for this introduction and also for organizing this together with the team of Škuc Gallery. Yeah, it's really great to have this invitation to introduce also our work and to contribute to this discussion that you opened, which I think kind of looms over the institutional landscape of Europe these days, this necessity to think about ways of transforming how institutions operate and how they respond to the climate emergency, but also to this instability of their own existence across the changing political climates of Europe. And most importantly, I think, is to include in this discussion this work of existing small-scale, quote-unquote, institutions that experiment with potential futures within the arts, but also beyond art, by ways of proposing different models and ways of coming together, and which are attuned both to the local possibilities, but also to these internationally driven dialogues. So I'm happy to be here and to speak on behalf of Transit Bucharest, and especially to reconnect with peers, as Giulia and I have met in the program run by Biljana Čirić, who is also here today, What Should Curating Do?, which I believe offered us very important references and points of departure for thinking about our own practices and the ways in which we could or actually should develop curatorial practices in our own localities, and most importantly, in relation to other constituents. My collaboration with Transit Bucharest began actually in a context of shifts and transformations, which were marked primarily by the experience of the pandemic, which of course, as many have experienced personally. And we all know that it not only surfaced the precarity and interdependencies of different life forms, but also kind of reoriented our sensibilities and ways of being together across various different sectors and spaces. So for me, it was also a personal, let's say, an effect on my personal life. In 2021, I decided to relocate to Romania after living and working for 8 years in Yogyakarta, Indonesia. So this small, culturally rich and artistic rich city, which is very much built, the artistic context is very much built on self-organized and bottom-up practices and community work. And this relocation was somehow unknown to me, like I wouldn't know where this repositioning will take me. And in the same year, Transit transitioned from its base in the city to an open field 40 kilometers north of Bucharest, also without clearly knowing what this repositioning will imply for the organization and for its members. So our meeting, mine with Transit, happened at this crossroads, at this intersection of deciding to take a new path towards new beginnings, which were aligned with an effort at reconnecting with the land, with the soil in both its material and immaterial sense, and for assuming a positionality amidst uncertainties, amidst potential failures, potential successes, and most importantly, to act in the present as the only certainty we can hold on to. So before talking about the work we do at the experimental station for research on art and life, because the invitation came to speak about this new endeavor, I will share a video of around 10 minutes to get a glimpse of the former Transit space, because I think it's important to know what has been transferred from the old place, what has been carried further, maintained, or left behind. And the voice narrating on the video belongs to Sharon, and is the alter persona of Raluca Voina, my mentor, colleague, friend, and companion, who couldn't not be here. And Sharon comes from a distant, not yet future. She is narrating all these peculiar activities humans have engaged with in this so-called artistic space called Transit. And she's talking as if they are species on extinction and relics of a longing past. And what is emphasized in this short video is actually how you will see in the end the possibility to still intervene in the course of history and change it for the better, as if the world was still real, to quote Sharon. So I will share my screen. From here.
The guard's cabin. First, there was no guard. In its more than 70 years of existence, it was the first time when that space didn't need to be guarded. Then there were pumpkins, which climbed and surrounded the cabin. Then the cabin was moved to the back of the garden, and turned into a shed for storing the garden tools. The table of complementary plants. In the beginning, everyone was very diligent in applying the permaculture principles. Tables of complementary plants were printed and stuck to the door, to the walls, posted on the Facebook garden group, sent by email to whoever was asking for them. Tomatoes could not stand being next to potatoes, mint was invasive and permanent, spinach was making a good partnership with aubergine. Later on, the principles were used in the art project Transit Cafe, by Daniela Palomariu. She applied the permaculture principles to human relations. The first summer party. We were young, love was in the air, birds were singing. There was place for strangers, and first-time visitors, as well as for those who took the party as a reward for their hard work. We had summer wine, and music, and salads from the garden. The garden Saturdays and the summer parties had names borrowed from popular songs. The meals. Eating together meant the work was worthwhile. Eating was a pretext to be together. There were spontaneous meals, and there were carefully organized ones. There were also some experiments. But overall, mostly everything was delicious. The snails. Enemy number one. First, they were overwhelmed by so much food, and couldn't manage to devour the salads. We placed an embargo on killing them. Some members of the garden group relocated them to the neighbors. At some point, we fed them oranges. Eventually, our salads were overwhelmed by them. Jerusalem artichokes. They were neither from Jerusalem, nor were they artichokes. Yet they taught us about the importance of plants' names genealogies. If you know how a plant has been named, you can trace its origins, itineraries, adaptations. Most common name for this plant is that of topinambar. They used to be the poor man's food after the war. They were our first harvested crop every year, usually in February, at the beginning of the new gardening season. They taste peculiar and they can give one stomach ache. Utopia. In 2015, artist Giulia Popa, a member of the garden group, attempted to build a spiral bed for the aromatic plants, which were thus meant to help each other and survive for longer. The spiral didn't succeed to its mission and was therefore turned into an artwork, a reference to Vladimir Tatlin and an acknowledgement that failures are part of our work. The raised beds. They were designed to extend the space for planting, to use the old, discarded wood from the space renovation, and to experiment with techniques such as the
Hügelkultur.
Every year they needed repairing. Plants took them over and spilled over, attempting to reach the other side of the garden. The solar flower. We never aspired to have a sculpture garden. Even less an orderly, art space where plants are a decoration for the better enjoyment of art. The solar flower, an artwork by Pavel Brela, was more an invitation to think about the energy that holds us together and alive, which we need to share and reflect around. Felicia. Felicia was the first cat of the garden. She gave birth to Sergei, who was hiding in a tree until he became the second cat of the garden. Then she brought Zarella, who gave birth to 2 cats in the garden. Other cats were passing through, some stayed. The garden became a home for these cats, and therefore a full-time job for us. Asimov. We invited a poet to build us a traditional oven. He named it Grandpa Asimov. Made entirely from recycled materials, it felt it has been in that place for decades. Our oven was indeed an old man, that provided us with warmth, bread and fantastic stories. The snow. The gradual disappearance of snow in winter was one of the signs the garden was giving to us, about climate change. Sometimes it snowed in April. Not much, but enough to destroy the flowers of the fruit trees. Heavy snow in January was a sign of joy and stability. I have a hard time remembering how it felt. I haven't seen snow in Bucharest since I left that garden. The orangery. Some plants, and some ideas, are fragile and need protection. So we extended the space, and opened the orangery. It even included the Museum of the Garden. It hosted meals, book launches, talks, exhibitions, a lot of plants, and even a New Year's party. The flowers. There were flowers throughout all seasons. Some that we planted in our first year in the garden, and they kept thriving. Flowers for bees and insects, flowers for our food, drinks or medicine, spontaneous flora, that was otherwise hard to find in the city, potted flowers. The garden was thus, not only a source of nourishment, and a cultivator of relations, but it was also simply beautiful. The times when the garden was full of people. Exhibition openings, screenings, presentations, workshops, meetings and lunches. People were welcome to spend time near the plants, even when there was less and less space among the vegetation. There were mosquitoes. Sometimes it was raining on the electronic equipment, at other times it was hard to make everyone feel safe from the violent gaze of patriarchy. There were expectations of free good food and drinks, there were children running around, there were eerie full moons, and serious conversations. Everything else. The poplars. The garden scene from the roof. The jungle in the beginning, and the jungle in the end. The jams made by Tīna from the garden fruits. The sequoia. The ailanthus. The monster building next door. The rainbows. There were all the things we couldn't take with us, and the ones we did take. After we left the garden, there was a collective green awakening, but it had to confront the love of war, reckless consumption, self-sufficient, miserable, individualism. I am not certified to tell you how it ended. I will withdraw now. There is time for you to act, as if the world is still real. You can still change the future, even if it means this conversation might have never taken place.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, that was the video. I thought it's important to share because it's also sort of rehearsal for me, as I was not part of this journey in the city. So my part is more with this intersection I mentioned, this crossroads of moving out. And so in this second part, I will share more about what we do at the experimental station. So I'm gonna share my screen again. Yeah. Yeah, so in 2021, lots of things happens for many of us. And it was a time of a lot of questioning for Transit and for its members of thinking how relevant is to stay in the city. I mean, the space was beautiful. It had this beautiful garden and already formed community, but it was also becoming extremely expensive to pay for the rent. And the problem is mainly that when you live in a city like Bucharest, the competition for organizations who are not run by profit is that they have to compete with the people who are doing, businesses thinking in these capitalist terms, and there is no involvement from the local authorities to support this kind of more different or let's say radical or progressive practices. Then having no jobs and this difficulty of maintaining the space, it came the idea to move outside of Bucharest, or at least somewhere around. And it was also about this, realization that we are somehow caught in this productive circuit of having to always produce exhibitions, to make works, and to apply for funding just to pay some huge rent that goes into the pockets of some landlord. So these considerations were like some of the premises for thinking about moving out. And having a garden in Bucharest is also a huge privilege. That's also the way that the idea was to kind of find also a place that is open, a garden, or at least an open field. And I don't know if you see my cursor, but this area of Bucharest, it's like the main city, and outside of it, it's another county called Ilfov, and it goes like around all this area. And so Raluca and the members of Transit started to find land that was affordable around this first closest area. And they couldn't find, they went north, east, west, and the only affordable version was in this north part, in Ilfov County, in the village of Siliștea Snagovului. And what is interesting is that the position is close to this natural protected area, like the Lake Snagov and the Snagov forest, which have like very rich flora and fauna, protected species, but also a lot of species that are on extinction. And this lake is also fascinating. But then when arriving there, we realized that there are a lot of local political problems in relation to these protected areas. Most of the shores of this lake are privatized, so they belong to random private people, and it's impossible to reach the shore of the lake, which used to be like a public space for canoeing, for swimming, and so on. And there is only one local organization who fights against all these politicians who are also involved in this corruption projects to buy parts of the forest, to cut it, and to build more and more houses. So we landed there in a way in this very contested field, in a former intensively agriculture land, like for growing wheat. This is how the land first looked like. It has like around 4,000 meters square. And this is Araluca, Eddie, and Giulia and Florin, who are also part of the group of the collective who co-owns and co-manages this place called the Station. Among others, philosophers and cultural workers and other artists. So if I have a question, do you still the screen now, or or see something else? Okay, good. So this is the first thing that was brought onto the land. It's like a container to store all the things we had at the beginning to start working on the land. And this is the first structure that we built. But I want to go at this image, and as you see it there, I want to read what the Station writes on what is it about on the website, what it aims to become. So the Station aims to become a center for contemporary art and research, a center for the study of nature, a resource and residency center, a prototype for a cultural institution grounded in a locality, shared with its community, situated in a post-development narrative, and based on ecological and ethical principles. And just to show you how this, image corresponds with the plans. And so this is the first structure we built. We took some recycled materials from another exhibition some of our colleagues did at the seaside, and we put them here. This was like a way to protect us from the sun, because it's very open field, and the sun comes directly on it, so there is no shelter. And this was our first event, where we invited a member of Jatiwangi Art Factory from Indonesia. We talked about the new rural agenda, their involvement at Documenta 15, as they had occupied quite a lot of space there and had initiated this civic political movement of the new rural agenda, which somehow is planned to continue but hasn't followed up since then, unfortunately. But it's still like an ongoing and very interesting project. So we had people who were part of the community of transit to talk about the dialogue with the context of the rural situation in Romania, for instance. And this was in July 2021. 2022, sorry. And this was an event for the winter solstice, and it was the opening of an installation by Kristen Wenzel in the frame of a project done by another member of a artist friend, and his annual project of the last archive, like the year of 2012, when media said that the world is going to end. So this is like a temporary sculpture. And the first thing that was planned on the land was Cosmos Garden. And for this, we worked with a landscape designer called Georgiana Strat. She imagined it as a living laboratory of experimentation for nature, art, and life. So the purpose was to test, observe, and foreground models that creatively answer to themes such as the decrease of water resources, conservation of biodiversity, migration of plants and animal species, models of sustainable feeding, and fighting desertification, among others. And Cosmos, it's actually a plant that originates from Mexico, Cosmos bipinnatus. So we planted around 80 species. We are still growing it as we speak. And one of our colleagues is also working on some files that include images and information, research of each plant that we have in the garden. So that will be also published on our upcoming website. And this is from the days we were planting. Some of these we first made the holes and then put the small plants or seeds. And it was in October 2022, and it was a very hot day, everyone remembers. And these are some of the plants that are there, and the idea was to also ask our friends and community to adopt one, so to have this more effective or connection with the plants there. For instance, this one on the left is Salix integra, so the Japanese willow, and this is the one I adopted. And so, you know, sometimes they come and check their adoptive plants and just to see how they are doing, some of them better than others. And this is another plant we had to deal with, and this is like a continuation of the Topinambur story from the transit space. So this is like an invasion of Topinambur that we had to cut and to grab from the land when the soil was wet. Yeah, it was very challenging to deal with this, but then we managed to clear the space and to save actually the plants that were around, because they can also like kill each other if there is too much of these roots of the Topinambur around the plants. Some friends suggested we bring chicken or some animals there to eat them, but that's still impossible because there is no one there all the time. So it's only visiting. And as you saw in the video, we had poet Vasile Leac to do the oven. And this time we invited him again to do a bigger version of the previous Asimov oven. And this one was called Demetra, the sister of Grandpa Asimov, just a way to invoke the ancient goddess of the crops and the grains, and to merge her benevolence with the texture of materials that are also coming from the earth. And so we think about this oven as a place to celebrate the harvest, the beginning and end of seasons, to gather around its fire and fresh smell of baking bread, although we haven't yet made bread. And so it was manufactured using bricks from the neighbors, because around the area there is a lot of torn down houses, and we also found you know, piles of bricks in front of people's homes, and they would just donate them or sometimes sell them to us. This is how it looks at the end. And in the context that you know, trying to think about building the station, there has been this platform that was successful in getting this funding from the Creative Europe funding programs, and initiated this project called Architecture, Biodiversity, Culture. So it runs for 3 or 4 years, and this is how we can like resource funding to actually build the station in a way that is made in collaboration with others, through participatory processes, through ways of experimenting and finding out together what fits and what goes better in that space and with the local resources we have. I'm not going to talk about the other partners because we do have like tight collaborations with Drenart in Bulgaria and Atelier d'Architectura Autogérée from Paris, but who also have a space in Brezoy, in one village in county of Sibiu, so around mountains. And so the project is thought that we do together research and mapping sessions, lecture sessions, and participative workshops where we invite a series of interdisciplinary or different constituents like architects, artists, biologists, hydrologists, and anyone who could contribute with knowledge on thinking about how to build these architectural prototypes. We call them prototypes because it's a way of experimenting with different models that are not copying what others are proposing using these modern materials, but more like experimented with local base and also self-sustained in a way prototypes. And a workshop we had was to look at the houses nearby. So this is kind of style of houses that can be found in the village area. And we had this amazing workshop with Jelica Jovanovic, who I've met in Biljana's project in Belgrade. And I invited then her to continue this collaboration in a way to Bucharest, to the station, to apply her knowledge about working with urban architecture for students from Bucharest and for the community we have, and also for us, just a way to learn about, how to do bricks and how to test the clay and so on. So the actual clay around the earth around the station is very clayey. That's what we found out. This is the structure we have managed to build, and it kind of stayed there like a monument, doing lots of plastering, trying different materials that would go normally for plastering a traditional house. And another workshop we had from another constellation with what should curating do is with Aslihan Demirtas, an architect and artist based in Istanbul, Turkey. And we had these walks around the forest of Snago forest, and we discovered, together different kinds of goods that are like foraging from the forest. And this is just to connect with the part of mapping that we are doing, trying to understand where we are situated in, and to do this always in a participatory way. And another workshop we are trying, and this is part of the prototypes of the ABC project, is doing a phytopurification system to clean and kind of purify the gray water of the kitchen that we will try to build around the area. So we will invite very soon a biologist to share with us knowledge about what kind of plants would go on this phytoepuration pool. And then working on creating this sewage system with the partners from the Atelier Autogéré, our partners in the project. So they are architects, and they can share with us their knowledge, and learning a lot from them as well, like also reskilling. And this is the last building or structure we have, the glass house, which is a recycled glass house from a city in Romania, or I think it's a village or small town. And we brought its parts and managed to install it. And this is how it looks at night with Jelica's monument here and all the other elements. So yeah.
Thank you so much. I think we need to move a bit.
Yeah, sorry for taking so long, but this is to end. This is how it looks from like a daylight image. And yeah, it is a work in progress, and we actually have started now with the new season to work more on it, and we go more often every time. So I wanted to also share, and maybe we can have a discussion about what it means to build an institution also based on how weather is changing and how to adapt to this weather condition and climate, because winter it's for rest, and then we have to work hard during the agricultural season. So thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if maybe Biliana, for you is a problem if Lorenzo speak before you, just because I know he has to go maybe a bit earlier, but so please, Lorenzo, go.
Hi, thanks a lot for the invitation. I'm gonna try to make it short. And yeah, it's like a very inspiring elements like Adelina was talking about. And I see already like few overlappings, even very different. So I just gonna talk briefly a little bit about the story of TIER. So TIER, that's the acronym of the Institute for Endotic Research. It's a project started in 2015. In 2018, we opened a space together with me and Benjamin Bush, who stayed until 2022. 2021 also Awefa Musubi joined as co-director, and since last year, Sufei Dertz and Augusto Gerardi, we are the three co-directors. And since a few months, since 1 year more or less, we also shared the space with two other groups. So in 2015, I started this project that it was in my own kitchen. And basically, it started as a failure, so to say. Sometime before I did an open call for a directorial position in an institution in Hamburg, which didn't go through. So I wrote I went through the second round of interviews. So then I had one of these projects we have in one folder in the computer for very long, which was called an endotic institution. So I decided to take this folder, open it, and put into practice the things I was imagining with this institution. And what I did is I recently moved to this new apartment with my partner at the time. We had a kitchen that we had to to do something with it, a very small kitchen. And I had a lot of booths that it was part of another project called the Narrative Machine Series, that it was basically a mobile architecture that you could adapt to many other places. And what I did is like I cut all the booths, transformed it into the kitchen, and I started to invite people in this like 14 square meters kitchen that we were very packed all the time. And we did a series of encounters trying to think about what this idea of the endotic could be. At the time, I was working a lot about the idea of concentration, because like unlike in openings, in exhibitions, and so on, like the idea was that to take 2 hours of time where the people would install artworks in this very small kitchen or do presentations, performances, screenings, even workshops, and so on. And we would be, without getting out of the kitchen, during 2-3 hours, like pretty much focusing on what it was presented in that day. There were people like Isabel Luis, Antonia Lampi, Sergio Ceballos, and many others, no? And it was also about concentration as well, because we were really concentrated spatially. So like we were always like very close to each other. We were very packed. When there were some days, we were many people there. And this thing, it was also quite important, because it was a way to create these intimate conditions to work with. And once we were all so close to each other, actually, it really facilitates a lot the relationships between people. Also, like, because we normally were meeting at 7 or something like that, there was also always food involved. The food, sometimes it was cooked by the people who wanted to do the presentation, also with some parts thinking through the food making. Sometimes we were doing while the presentation was happening, some other times I was cooking. So yeah, it was quite open. So like the first thing, it was like, as I was saying, like to depart for imagining what could be the endotic. And the reason why I chose these words, it was because, like, first of all, it was like words that it was not very much used. This word is taken from a very beautiful text from Georges Perec, who was a French writer, part of the OLIPO, like the experimental writing group from France. And basically, there is only 2 or 3 lines that define what endotic is. And what is to say, it's like the antonym of the exotic. And it would be this idea of the endotic, the foundation of an anthropology of our own, like to stop pillaging from what we've been pillaging from the others. And this very short quote from Perec for me made me think a lot when I was doing this other application. What would you say? The mindset? That's a question. Sorry. So this idea of the endotic for me was quite important in the sense that how could we imagine divergent genealogies for thinking of exhibitions. At the time, I was doing a lot of curation and a lot of artworks at the same time. And it was always like kind of curious to me, like most of the histories of exhibition making or even museums or collections, they were always starting with the idea of the curio cabinet, no? The Wunderkammer. And I found this highly problematic because this Wunderkammer, it's one of the dispositives, one of the devices like the colonial history was using to basically like make the basis of a cultural visuality part of capitalism, in the sense like you would have many of these items brought from the colonies, like could be sometimes animals, parts of plants, drawing of plants, or cultural artifacts that they were shown as exhibits, no? And through this like visual history, even though these artifacts were presented as a device for educational projects, what we had is that all these collections and exhibitions were showing like a dark sides of the colonial program. There is also Dorothea von Hantelmann in the text he wrote for the Documenta 12, I think, the book of books, like it was made of all these booklets. She was analyzing the origin of the word exhibition, and she talks about that it's coming from ex ibit, so ex habitare. So it's like taking something out of the place of origin, no? And like, so as she describes a process of extraction, no? Like the history of exhibitions and the naming exhibition as such incorporates already into its discursive apparatus, like the process of extraction. So in order to try to think another possible genealogy, a divergent genealogy, I started to think about this question of the endotic. That presents like an anthropology of our own. And I found this actually potent, also in the sense like it could allow to start to work like with what we have around, no? For example, we can still like understand the history of copper that it's in the wall, in each wall or its phone or its apparatus we use, and we could actually trace the connections with Chile through these things we have around. But then actually would be a different processes because we do start from the everyday life to understand these other cultural possibilities. Also, like something important to mention about Tier. So when I started to work with Tier, it's like I was thinking more like as an app project rather than an institution as such. Although like the plan it was to use like the form of an institute as a capture. And actually there I was taking this idea of German Mexican architect, artist and curator Matthias Goeritz, this idea of the habitable sculpture, no? So when I started the project in my own kitchen, like the idea is we were somehow inside of an architecture that was also a place that worked as a sculpture, and because it was in a house itself, it was habitable, no? So also like this part that it was more like an art project, it was like giving like some kind of possible hints to think differently than like a regular process of to think about the institution. Also, when thinking a lot, which kind of possible forms of institution making they were there at the time. Also, that when I started to think about this thing, that it was around 10 years ago, there was a lot of discussion about the Kunsthalle, like all these like different, the museum, all these possibilities. And I found the institute actually was quite interesting because in terms of scale, an institute could be like a whole branch of Google, could be one of the parts of a department in the university, or could be someone with a small scientific lab in the living room. No? So like in terms of which kind of institutional definition we could work with, then there was like this element of the choosing the idea of the institute. Some other question that it was in the beginning very important. It was also like to think from the domestic, which is something that has been present during all this time. Like it was trying to learn how through the elements that they are like in the domestic sphere, like how could we set new forms of institutionalization. And this was going in few different ways. And it was also before all these like discourses around the notion of care, which I think we have to be very critical on the use of the care, because normally the notion of care actually it reinforces a lot of elements like of unpaid labor, for instance, and many other, or like also like interdependencies, which sometimes they are not chosen. But yeah, like coming back to this idea of the domestic, also there is like something like I quite find fascinating. Like it's like we have something like it is as a presentation of cultural devices in everyone's houses. I mean, we all have like artwork, pictures, design, socialization processes in everyone's houses. And I thought actually it could be also a very good model to how to think, how to work with art and culture in future institutions. And at the same time, it was like at the time, like all the algorithmic governance was starting. So in one hand, we had the presence more and more of all the, like this was 10 years ago, of the funds, the type of funds we have now that they are collecting information non-stop. So therefore, commodification of the private life in an indirect way, and also in a direct way, like the way all the processes related to the Airbnb or these kind of platforms or sharing cars or things like that, that made at the time every part of life like to be transformed into fixed capital. So actually you could commodify and make money every time you were not using a room in a house, you could start to make money of it. So actually these few processes, like before in the past, they belong to the public sphere, they started to happen in the domestic sphere. So that's something like to think about. If, for example, in the public sphere, normally we would have the processes of making unions or like the processes of instituting, like it's the coming together, like to set a series of protocols to produce kind of a space. Like maybe we should perhaps start to think how to do also this kind of self-institutionalization processes in the core of the private life, because we have to also like start to defend our lives there. One more thing I was working with, it was another idea, like I always like a lot of this question of the fictional institution. And this was based on Justo Pastor Mellado. Like he's a curator from Chile, like an old one. He had a very important text called The Curator as Producers of Infrastructure. And he wrote another text that was called something like Bureaucratic Writings. And it was about the process and the project he did for the Parque Cultural in Valparaíso. And basically what he was saying that before thinking about the managerial model, one has to think about the fiction of the model. And also I thought that this is quite powerful, like because in the sense, like every time like we are writing a project these days, we are already imagining and setting the possibilities of an institution or a project or an artwork. But there is all these like fictional elements. Like in many cases, we think as something like it's not the funniest thing to do, but actually we can play up a lot with the forms of the things we want to project now. So like this kind of like fiction of the model, like he talked about, it gives you a lot of elements. Departing from that, then also there was all these elements like we did at Tīna since the very beginning. So it was analyzing actually in terms of presence, what makes an institution, no? So very soon we start with a logo, with a web, with a Instagram, with all these elements to create kind of a presence. And actually we can create these processes of instituting with very simple elements and make it present, and people would start to know about them if you keep working on them, of course, and making it grow or work with the cuisine as well. So, but yeah, like one of the parts, it was like to work into the elements on what makes an institution, no? Which kind of elements can we think like to call something an institution or not? Which I found that could be quite powerful. And just to finish, like there was like I'll tell you very briefly about the program. Since the very beginning, we didn't want to do exhibitions. Also because it's like, again, this process, I mean, I do exhibition as an artist a lot all the time, or as a curator even, but with the idea was like to depart from other processes. So what is like an art institution can do if it doesn't work with institutions, no? Like for example, Adelina, like I think like she puts very beautiful examples as well. And here we started to work with encounters, that it was as simple as asking someone to do a presentation. Yeah, half an hour, could be a PDF, could be like some other people would do performances, some other people would present a text and try to talk with the people. So it's a very simple way of bringing the people together. The second thing we were doing, it was workshops. With workshops, we were working with things that they were from singing to yoga, to elements that they were be part of the third format. Like the third format, it was interventions in the space. So we were not doing exhibitions, but we would invite people to have artworks there. But the artworks, they've been functional. So for example, we had like a one piece by Kanako Isi in the window, but it was a curtain as well. We had a sculpture from Josep Maino, but this sculpture was also a lamp. So we will be working this element that slowly, but they are like co-producing the space together with the institution. Then another thing we would do often, it's like walks through the city, like performative walks, where we present readings, or we would study things from the city, like thinking very much about this history of the public art in Berlin and how to recover like some elements of the welfare state, like producing arts, like how we can activate this element. Then we've been doing publications as well, like they're always in our website, PDF, like free to download, and then we were making like just few copies. And I just said we were not doing exhibitions, but we did exhibitions as well. But the exhibitions we did, it was in the pandemic. So when all the spaces in Berlin were closing, the exhibitions, then it's when we started to do the exhibitions. And we were using the exhibition as using the powers of the exhibition to isolate. So actually it was like a very good system to have just one person at the time watching the artworks and so on. Yeah, and I think I leave it there.
Thank you so much, Lorenzo. I think your presentation touched upon a very important point, what is an institution, the protocols, the people that make an institution. So with this question, we can beautifully transit to Biliana presentation. And Biliana, I leave the floor to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Giulia, for a kind invitation, and thank you, Tīna. And of course, thank you to Škuc Gallery for handling everything behind the scenes. I'm very privileged to be here, especially because I had spent some beautiful time with Giulia and Adelina during the program in 2022. And I think a lot of things that has been said from Adelina and really kind of, and the second presentation really touched on what we are thinking or maybe more of struggling with. But what Giulia said at the very beginning, what I'm kind of convinced to do through what should curating do to actually practice these things and learn from the failures, which I think is extremely important for our work to kind of think how to institute otherwise, but also practice those experiments. And I think another very important thing is that we cannot do this together. So these encounters are extremely important and valuable to learn and share the struggle. And I was very inspired by the station. I actually went to visit the station with the colleagues who are at the program at the moment, and Laura is here tonight with us. Me, Laura, and Miriam went to visit the station, to walk the land. I think walking is very important as a way of knowing, and to actually learn from those examples as well. So I will be sharing what we have been trying to do here. So I will try to share my screen. Yeah, you see it?
Yes, we see it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So so a lot of things that I will talk about, I named it as a compass because there is a lot of things. It's quite an interesting and very dynamic time. So it's a kind of direction where we are heading to. It's very dynamic and things are changing, especially in the place where there is very little or no support for the work that we do. So you really kind of have to invent the way you do things and how you do them. So a lot of things that I will discuss today is will be focused on educational program, because I think for us, educational program is place where we test things with colleagues, where we learn and do different tryouts as a kind of collective learning proposition. So yes, I will try to talk about mostly about educational program and long-term curatorial inquiries if I have a time. So Giulia, you can just tell me to stop when it's time. So we are at the start of the transition, and unfortunately violent one. The way of life as we used to live will shift, taking into consideration ecological, economic, and ethical set of questions that came to surface especially after pandemic, and I think Adelina has addressed this. This slow transition will influence how we live and relate to each other, but also what rituals we practice in arts and culture, how these rituals are practiced and what ethics they stand for. As we heard, like one of the biggest rituals that we practice is exhibition as a ritual that kind of stabilizes the institution. While COVID-19 experience sharpened geopolitical division, new wars as a competition among powerful nations, what we experience on another less visible level, and here I'm being very optimistic, as Chus Martinez says, as not as a fact, but as a method. What we are experiencing on a less visible level is a way of coming together of actors in the field of art, to be it individual or institutions, towards practicing sustainable modes of working and healthier way of relating to each other that is not based on competition for resources, but on sharing limited resources. Experience of isolation and failure of a majority of art institutions to perform role in the crisis for practitioners from certain type of institutions, and I would say those precarious one, this was awakening call and acknowledgement that answered to many questions we can't gain individually, and that we need to enter collective process of decolonizing, trying different models and failing, trying, learning with each other as a form of care. Questions that emerge are, can we bend existing art institutions, trying to imagine how to transform them into something rather than burn them using avant-garde tactics? Can we have more ecological and ethical approach to reuse art institutions for different needs for communities, and how they can play the active role in transition that we're going through? What role curatorial plays in enabling these more compelling processes? Here, how we define the notion of curatorial that goes beyond taking care of an object or an exhibition and transforming into something that creates conditions to allow new relationships to emerge. Restructuring this parameter would require structural change that we are still avoiding to make. It would mean giving away power and allowing new relations to emerge, new vocabularies, creating new citations, and different forms of literacies. And here I will be sharing my own embodied knowledge in process of instituting what should creating do. This is a beautiful photo from one of our workshops last year. In 2018, I formed the institution, What Should Curating Do? It's an attempt towards instituting tongue-in-cheek, but doing so, it relates to tradition of artist institutions throughout history, and it also uses strategy of performing stabilities that the institutions contain when defining them as such. And that very image being revealed to outside world gives its freedom to corrupt expectations towards that very definition. Canadian Indigenous scholar Donald Dwayne reminds us that the issues of climate change and sustainability are not problems that science and technology can solve. They're problems of cultural and spiritual origin. We change things not by telling people what they should do, but by changing the way they live, or the way we live in this case. So how does an art institution live? And where does an art institution live? What should curating do from 2023 started through educational program, self-reflective process, developing a model of institution between urban and rural ecologies, connected to the plot of land in central Serbia with the question, what does it mean for an art institution to become custodian of the land? This self-reflective process is realized through an educational program, as I said, and long-term engagement of the program mentors, invited collaborators, program participants, local communities, and us. Thinking these questions that Donald Dwayne put so accurately, we have decided to try to understand what is our response towards sustainable mode of instituting and how that way of doing is produced. Since 2018, when we started, we didn't have a physical permanent space, as we didn't want to enter the traps of exhibition space and constant exhibition producing rituals. We wanted to understand what kind of space we want to become. And that time, we actually couldn't articulate what that space is or could be. We have interrogated this question slowly, understanding how we can possibly continue in situated and thoughtful way, not falling into traps of expected. Now, we are finally able to articulate that space in the urban should not be the gallery, but the space that merges work and life, food for stomach, food for thought, a place where people, knowledge, ideas, taste are cooked, explored, tasted, and shared. We are committed to formulate space that allows an embodied sense of knowing, not only through head, but through your stomach or gut, as some people say. We are working towards establishing our space in a farmers market in downtown Belgrade that will open in this spring. Farmers market is the space where you can meet the ruling power, oppositions, future ruling powers, farmers, intellectual, migrants, all occupied by the basic need, food for every day. Food is essential, and we claim that art should be essential too. Farmers market is a place where urban and rural meet, but also a place that allows direct access to the other cultures established through affective relationship with our stomach and taste. Stomach here becomes very important, is central in our system, as Vanessa Machado de Oliveira, Trinity Menegale, and many other scholars and thinkers reminds us. It is through the middle of our body where our neural change chemistry influences heart to be filled with will and directly influence, of course, our head. It is proposition to embodied knowledge through different engagement, not only visual. I think important aspect of the farmers market is that the toilet is communal, that is needed, that is used by everyone, and that is there for everyone. Sadly, all we flesh is still going directly in the Danube River into the fish mouth and back into us. We often forget that the planet is metabolism and that the shit that we splash far away will return to us, but not only to us here in local Belgrade, but to all of us because water connects us. Continuing to think where our art institutions live and what are our margins, last year, we have also situated ourselves in the rural, and you can see the view from the toilet in the rural. The rural extension is also an attempt to interrogate these questions in a close proximity with land, difficulty of living in the countryside, but really difficulty, but also of beauty because being close to this trouble. We don't have a romantic vision of the countryside, but what we have in mind to think collectively, curatorial and artistic work, an extended field of caring for land is a caring for culture. It's also a process of decolonizing our ways of doing and making and knowing. It's also a commitment finding answer. What do we mean when we say sustainable institution? Do we mean to think where our ship goes, or meaning how much water we use, who cooks the food for us, where does this food come from, whose sweat has watered the land to grow what we eat, where do we meet to talk about these issues, with whom we meet to talk about this issue, and how we relate to the water, to land, to soil, more than human world, but also between each other. And here, the space that you've seen, that we did adaptation in the countryside is done by Sergio Montero Bravo from Inland and Jelica Jovanovic that Adelina mentioned, who was our mentors for many years, a local architect who works with vernacular architecture, and they basically helped constructing the basic facilities of eco-toilet, showers, and a place where program participants stayed with no funding done. and it's made all out of found materials. And one of the very important transitions that we did from 2023, that the program is now a year-long program. So this current program is still happening. And one of the very important things that we started through educational program are something that we call structural commissions. They're commissions of the mentors that we are engaged with on a longer run to explore and respond to certain issues that we need to work through together with the communities. And one of the first projects that we are working towards is MOBA production, and I will talk about it very briefly. And what we also did this year is we created an advisory board towards the rural that consisted of two people, Bojana Popovic, who is a teenager who lives in the village, and she's also developing a project with us. And Ivan Glišić, who lives in the village, and he's a professor of agronomy in the faculty in a small town nearby. With the colleagues from educational program, and we are developing project with Luigi Coppola called MOBA production, and it's still ongoing. I think we imagine it as a long-term project that actually is just starting or taking shape. MOBA was a form of solidarity that existed in local communities till, let's say, mid-20th century, where people would come whenever you need help to build a house or take care of the land or collect fruit. The neighbors, the villagers will come to help you with no monetary exchange, but you as a host would have to prepare a food, and usually you would invite the musician to create like a celebration at the end of the day. So MOBA is known to older generation as something very important that incorporates intergenerational exchange, learning skill, and many, many different things. And what we are trying to do is to really think how that model could be implemented today and to respond to the needs of the communities. I'm just going to share what Mirjana Savić, one of the artists in the program, shared, done for the presentation that we presented to the villagers, that includes some of the key points that we were looking at: co-production, intergenerational cooperation, exchange of knowledge, curation of social relations, sustainability, decentralization, etc. Making with hands, skill sharing, biodiversity. And we have presented this January, together with Luigi, the proposition towards communitarian process to the village. This is happening in the primary school in the village, and we actually had a great attendance, which we couldn't expect at all. And we at the moment have around 15 families who are willing to enter this communitarian process of sharing resources, etc. But we are at the very beginning of this. Another thing that I would like to mention as well is that together with Sergio Montero Bravo and Jelica Jovanovic, we are continuing to work together to think about the space in Belgrade, and we are in a month we are starting a project thinking about what kind of space cultural institutions should be in the times of scarcity. So it's going to be ongoing project thinking about design of the space of the cultural institution. The colleagues from the educational program will also have a public presentation that we are working towards. So it will be, we are working towards presentation sometime in June. So I would suggest that you follow what we are doing we will announce very soon. And now, if I have the time, I would also briefly address one of the projects that we did, but it's not ended, it's just transformed into something else. It's one of these slow curatorial inquiries that take some years to develop with the different, not exhibitionary moments, because I think I also avoid to think about in that terms, but as beautifully stated before me, like encounters, which I think proposes different ways of thinking and relating to each other. So this is the project that started in 2019 that looks at the impact of Belt and Road Initiative. Is a Chinese very big infrastructural development around the world, but the focus was Central Asia, China, Balkans, and East Horn of Africa. And it ended in 2022. I like to explain that the As You Go as a project attempted to practice the curatorial in the way that nurture relational space within inquiry to sabotage the colonial systems that connects us, their thought, power, and modes of working, inviting both humans and us subhumans to be equally present and participate in conceptual space where our disasters are theorized and responses formulated. And as you probably can imagine, BRI is an infrastructural project. They're building many roads and railways, which is a good thing. But, you know, on the other hand, you have a very big extractions of the from the mines, deforestation, etc., in many different places that we looked at. On the other hand, I think As You Go kind of try to interrogate what kind of relationship we need. And the project was structured as through the partners' cells, who were extremely uneven. So they go from the public museums like Moderna Galleria to private museums like these two in China, to individuals like artist Robert Temesgen from Addis Ababa, writers Signe Hasetu. We were very uneven, so allowing that difference to coexist. We did the two encounters. One was in Addis Ababa in 2020 when we just started, and it was right before the pandemic. And we did another encounter in Bor. It's a mining town in Serbia where Chinese company Zijin took majority of shares of the copper mine, and now they're also digging in gold. We had, because we worked together through the pandemic, which was extremely difficult time and very big pressure because of the new geopolitical Cold War that kind of emerged out of that. We try to kind of follow work of our researchers. We had around 20 of them through the online journal that is still present on our website. We also had an online symposium with Moderna Gallery in 2021 and did a book in 2022. So this is our small album from the visits and encounters in Bor and Addis Ababa, and this is the publication, something that kind of comes together with the previous Lorenzo's discussion. We also started a new program, Walking as a Way of Knowing, that kind of looks at the history of Belgrade through a different lens of more fragmented histories that are not part of the narratives that this city maybe has that potentiality, but I think for us it's also very important, this gesture of walking through some as a proposition to think together, to walk together, to know and notice the space differently. So I think I'm going to stop here. I think, you know, as you can understand, this is still very much in making, and I think besides making institutional spaces, I think there is a whole issue around how to sustain them, not economically, ecologically, ethically, and you know, we are working on a different experiment. So I think these are some of the directions that we are heading to. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Viviana. I think also your presentation touched upon a very important concern regarding also the need of building infrastructure, sometimes from zero, and also in somehow a shift if we want to think about, I don't know, past behavior and attitude of institutional critique. That is what I'm concerned with in my PhD, which was critiquing the institution, and now I see, at least this is my idea, as a tendency toward like build anew, because it feels that it's so difficult to correct the existent one that sometimes it will be as important to create a new space and rewrite them from the beginning.